Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. One of the reasons why we have introduced a segment for international news is that cannabis prohibition is fast becoming an issue in many other countries, and the worldwide prohibition continues to erode. In some countries like Indonesia, the laws are draconian. That means harsh or severe. We've got another definition: unjust, unfair, and ridiculous. 3 weeks ago, a 34-year-old American professional basketball player named Jared Shaw was busted for 134 cannabis edibles that were sent to his apartment from Thailand. He was arrested for possession and distribution and is now facing the reality that he could be sentenced to life in prison and even paraded before a firing squad to be shot. If you remember the saga of former Olympian Brittany Griner, she was arrested in a Russian airport over a year ago and was sent to prison in that country, where she spent almost 10 months before the US government was able to get her freed through a prisoner exchange. The chances that the US government will get involved with Texas native Jared Shaw are minimal at best. There's even a report now that English tourists are going to Thailand in order to smuggle out cannabis from that country. So now you have to wonder if you think that maybe someone was trying to set up this basketball professional by shipping him the edibles from Thailand. Unfortunately, in Indonesia, you are considered guilty and have to prove your innocence, unlike here in the US, where the opposite is true. So the future does not look too hopeful for him. To make matters even more dire, there isn't, or hasn't rather, even been one follow-up to the story in the media over the past few weeks since his arrest. Shaw was made an example of when he was paraded before the media before being escorted off to prison. And in England this week, the London Drug Commission announced 42 recommendations for federal reform covering education, healthcare, and law enforcement. The report did not call for legalization, but does recommend that cannabis be removed from the Misuse of Drugs Act and added to their Psychoactive Substances Act, which means that cannabis possession for personal use would not be a criminal act. That alone is a major step towards reform for that country, and the London mayor is already embracing that change. In the meantime, there was a huge bust in Portugal, and Ben Stevens has that story in his European report.
I'm Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, with this week's European report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Portuguese police have launched a major crackdown on an international criminal gang accused of exploiting loopholes in the country's medical cannabis laws to illegally export millions of pounds worth of product. Earlier this week, authorities carried out 64 raids across mainland Portugal, the island of Madeira, as part of Operation Evredanina. The investigation, which began in 2022, has so far led to the seizure of 7.3 tonnes of cannabis, over 400,000 euros in cash, 12 vehicles, 11 firearms, and the arrest of 5 individuals. The Portuguese judicial police, working closely with their Spanish counterparts, say the gang purchased licensed pharmaceutical companies and created wholesale cannabis businesses as a front, then used false documents to traffic thousands of kilos of cannabis to illicit markets. Raids were also conducted beyond Portugal, with 6 taking place in Spain, 1 in Bulgaria and 1 in Cyprus. Portugal is the world's second largest cultivator of cannabis after Canada. Dozens of licensed operators grow, manufacture and distribute cannabis products legally, and many are now voicing their concern over the potential damage this could do to the sector's credibility. Curaleaf International, which has a large presence in the country, welcomed the enforcement action. Its head, Juan Martinez, said the operation helps protect responsible operators and preserve the credibility of the sector, adding that their facilities were not searched and continue to meet all regulatory standards. Portugal's National Medicines Authority, Infarmed, has yet to comment, but with investigations ongoing and more arrests suspected, the industry is bracing for further fallout. That's all from me this week. I'm Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Cannabis Coast to Coast report. What we have in Ontario this week are 2 farm gates located in Kingston, Ontario. Kingston Cannabis and Level Up Infusions are now offering their clones for sale. This is something that is going to be great for many of the micro cultivars that are going to be growing and wanting to be able to have not only their strains that are preference, but are also grown in an LP, which is also going to be great. With this is going to be something for many of our provinces to be able to look into, and hopefully soon enough, most of them, if not all, will be able to put this into effect and also be able to provide clones to many others, hopefully consumers as well. Next we have is a hash recall in Quebec, which is due to their packaging. This packaging to Health Canada was something that they found easily able to be opened by very, very, very young adults, so children. With this being recalled, this just means that they have to now diligently create a new sort of packaging that is not only going to be safe for children, but is now going to be under the regulations. May 27th to 28th, we had the Grow Up Conference here in Toronto, Ontario. It was not only a great way for many of us Ontarians to be able to connect, reconnect, and to start new connections, but it was also an amazing experience to be able to not only for the bud tenders for the first time to be able to attend a conference, but to also obtain samples, which is something that most bud tenders or people that do have their can sell are able to benefit from. So, as for Canada, this is Debi Facey, your Canadian correspondent, with the Coast to Coast news of the week. Peace.
Now let's turn back to the US and talk about the race to become the 25th state to pass adult use legalization. The state of Pennsylvania, and their first attempt was to propose a state-run effort, but that got defeated in a Senate committee 2 weeks ago. And now State Senator Marty Flynn, a Democrat from Scranton, shared a proposal for adult use that establishes a regulatory framework for cultivation, distribution, and legal retail sales for adults to use. It's called the Keystone Cannabis Act, and he hopes to introduce it when his fellow legislators return to work after their holiday break. Flynn is circulating his intent to file that bill in a memo that said adults should be free to make their own decisions about cannabis use, just as they do with alcohol and tobacco, without unnecessary government interference, end quote. Now, let's get to Virginia to check in with Joe Parsons on the efforts for reform in that state.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. With bipartisan efforts, the Commonwealth has decided to bring back the Virginia Cannabis Commission. The newly reformed commission is made up of 10 legislative members, 6 from the House of Delegates, and 4 members from the Senate, with a mission to help shape current and future cannabis policy in Virginia. The good news is that Virginia's very own Chelsea Higgs Wise from the Richmond-based Marijuana Justice will be working hand in hand with the lawmakers to make sure the system stays rooted in equity, transparency, and repair to those most affected by the failed war on drugs. While she will not have a formal seat on the commission, she will work directly with lawmakers, as she's done before, to help shape the past cannabis bills that have been vetoed over the last 2 years. We wish her all the best and continued success. Speaking of great organizations that support justice and reform, I was able to catch up with Lonnie Hayes III, the director of the Virginia chapter for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, on Coffee Talk. It was a great show, and it was great to have him on. So, here's a little more from him on why M4MM is so important.
It's an important organization because an industry is about to emerge that is going to leave a group of people behind, and this industry will bring in a substantial amount of money that the taxes from it, when we get a bill passed with provisions to have 70% of all the tax revenue go to the underserved communities, can improve communities. That's why it's so important.
Be sure to follow both of these great organizations to ensure justice for everyone in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You can always follow Marijuana Justice at THC Justice Now and M4MM at minoritiesformedicalmarijuana.org. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB in Charlottesville. And as always, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
In Washington state, cannabis officials there announced that the state will start to accept new social equity retail applications starting this month. The state plans on giving out 52 new licenses, which will be the largest distribution of licenses in Washington since legalization passed over 10 years ago. With more from that state, here is Matthew Friedlander, who is actively involved with policy there.
I'm Matthew Friedlander with Scheduled Organics, reporting from Leaf Bowl for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. So, like I said, I'm down here at the 2025 Northwest Leaf Bowl. Scheduled Organics just picked up an award for Best Capsules. Pretty excited about that. This is a good reminder that the cannabis industry is still alive and well, and the cannabis community is still out here having fun. It's not just all hard work and no fun, so we are enjoying ourselves. A couple things have happened this week, though, here in Washington. On the cannabis side, social equity licenses opened up again. So there is a new round of licensing that's happened here in Washington State for social equity retail licenses. Also, an important thing to note about this event is that this is the first event in Washington that has on-site cannabis sales. So the Puyallup tribe operates Commencement Bay Cannabis, and they are hosting the Northwest Leaf Bowl on their property this year. And the tribal entities here in Washington have, a little bit of
That's what's going on.
the ability to do things their own way. So they are pushing the envelope here with the first on-site cannabis sales in Washington State. Pretty excited to be at this event. So that's what I've got for you this week out of Washington, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
There are a number of states who are trying to block citizen initiatives to get questions on ballots for elections. Traditionally, the tactic of the ballot question has been a reason to drive more people to the polls to vote. Cannabis questions tend to be the catalyst for many people to exercise their voting rights and traditionally has a positive impact on voter turnout. However, there is a problem that has arisen in places like Colorado, Texas, Florida, and now Nebraska. That problem is that the already elected officials in those states don't like the results. They especially have a disdain for some of these ballot initiatives that involve cannabis for medical purposes or adult use. And now you can add the state of Oklahoma to the list of states who want to make sure their legislatures are the only ones to initiate any kind of reform, not the people. And this is a blatant attack on one of the basics of any democracy, that citizens can make changes to laws that are unjust or just not fair. Here's Kimmie Cannabis with more from Oklahoma.
I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Big developments are unfolding in Oklahoma's cannabis scene. Governor Kevin Stitt has just signed a controversial new law tightening restrictions on ballot initiatives. We're talking limits on how many petition signatures can come from one county and stricter requirements for language approval before anything reaches the ballot. But don't count the activist out just yet. Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action, also known as ORCA, are pushing forward with their 2026 adult use legalization campaign. They're hoping they beat the deadline, filing their petition just before the new law went into effect. If so, the new restrictions may not apply to their initiative, and that could keep their path to legalization wide open. Meanwhile, over at the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, House Bill 2807 is officially rolling out. Starting June 1st, all medical marijuana flower products must be sold in pre-packaged form. No more deli-style buds behind the counter. Dispensaries have until November 1st to sell off current inventory. And in a move to help streamline the supply chain, licensed transporters can now store products in designated warehouses. So while the landscape is shifting fast, Oklahoma's cannabis community isn't backing down. It's adapting, pushing forward, and staying in the fight. That's it for Oklahoma's Cannabis Report. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
On the West Coast, there's a few stories to share. One in California is about a major bust of illegal cannabis operations. In a multi-agency operation in the Central Valley, Governor Newsom's office reports that the task force seized over 100,000 plants, just over 22,000 pounds of processed cannabis with an estimated value over $123 million. It was the largest bust for California's state task force dedicated to stopping the illegal cannabis operations that continue to flourish in that state. Our Oregon correspondent, Marianne Cursetjee, has been busy on the East Coast over the past few weeks as she works on getting her Alibi products into the New York market. In fact, she was featured in an MJ Biz Daily article. This week, she submits a special one special report with an interview with an Entourage cannabis operator, Tucker Holland, who is another success story in her state of Oregon. So here's Marianne with that.
This is a Cannabis Coast to Coast news special, one-on-one. I'm Marianne with Alibi, with Tucker Holland from Entourage Cannabis. Thanks so much for joining us, Tucker. You guys,
awesome. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Marianne.
Yeah, you guys just cleaned up at the Oregon Leaf Bowl. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, what a great surprise. When we enter things in the competition, it really is. It's we pull it straight off our manufacturing line. Managers vote on the products that we feel like is just best in the shop at that time, and those are what gets entered. And so, there's always an expectation from our people that we're going to win something. That's just the level of standards that we have, and so we're always expecting something. But to walk away with five is quite the surprise, quite the honor. But I think it's definitely a testament to honestly the farms that we work with, like Alibi, but also the high attention to detail that our staff has when making these products. And so it's definitely rewarding for them to see that their hard work really pays off.
That's pretty awesome. So, we're both operators in Oregon, and we know that the Oregon market is really tough and really crowded. So what enables you guys to stand out in the market and continue on your path of excellence?
Great question. I think it's definitely understanding what our values are and then sticking to those. And so really, as we've kind of grown and really blossom into our identity as a company, it's a company for the everyday smoker. And we're a company of smokers, of consumers that are making products for consumers. And so really when we identify, we don't want to make a product that we're not going to smoke or use ourselves. And so we've really set the bar high. In some cases, higher than even what the state mandates when it comes to testing and stuff like that. But we're going to, when we set those standards, we set those values of quality, of protecting cannabis, of making sure that we have no pesticides, no heavy metals, nothing at all in our products. I think that's really been the driving force for our brand.
That's amazing. So what are your plans for the rest of this year or the future?
The rest of this year is definitely trying to solidify kind of our position that we've had. We're definitely looking very closely at edibles. So looking at possibly coming out with those edibles, gummies probably would be the first thing. Definitely looking at where we can do that. Kitchen space, space is limited where we're at. We're definitely bursting at the seams. So trying to find the area that we can do it at. And that's really the next goals. But we're also we've about last year we released our rosin vape cart, and but now we're a month away of releasing our rosin dabbables. Which we're very excited about. We kind of got the market prepped with the vapes, and everyone's been asking for the dabbables, where the dabbables at. So we're going to be launching those within a month, and so we're very excited about that as well.
That'll do it for the B block, but we have another full section coming up, including more state reports and PCM TV's Jimmy Young talks with our new Alabama correspondent, Jennifer Boozer. Her dispensary, Sweet Home Cannabama, is taking a hit from the lack of direction in her state. as more delays continue to stall the rollout of their medical program that was approved 4 years ago and has been tied up with litigation. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this break.
The biggest thing that's happened is this week, my personal and radio, Facebook, and Instagram pages have been completely banned.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.